Good morning and welcome to the KDPG Sunday edition. I'm John Delano. Stacy Smith and Ken Rice are away this week. President Donald Trump is receiving praise from both labor and management in much of the steel industry for his decision to impose tariffs of 25% on steel imports and 10% on aluminum that is manufactured outside of this country and exported to America. There were some concerns that wide-ranging tariffs, including steel and aluminum products from neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico, could spark a trade war from retaliation from two of our closest allies. But for now, they've been exempted from these tariffs, with the president hoping for a better NAFTA trade deal with them. So are the tariffs and what are some call a protectionist American trade policy good or bad idea? Well, last week, PNC Chief Economist Gus Faucher, CMU's Dr. Sevan Yeltkin, and the University of Pittsburgh's Jay Sutkitz shared their thoughts about this issue on this program. This week, we welcome a man who is all too familiar with the impact of imported goods that compete in America with our own steel and aluminum products. Leo Gerard is International President of the United Steelworkers, a diversified union whose members include 1.2 million current and retired employees. David Tripman, executive editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joins us for this morning's discussion. Leo, welcome to the show. Always good to see you and to be with you. Let's see if I could go a little primer on the trade deficit so folks are on the same page. We have in 2017 a trade deficit of $566 billion. What does that mean? That means that we import goods and services into the United States in excess of what we send overseas by the tune of $566 billion. Normally that would be fine if it was free trade everywhere, if everyone was dealing by the same rules. But as we know, different countries impose different rules and restrictions on American products. And one of the biggest offenders is China, with a trade deficit. More than half of that trade deficit is with China, $375 billion. And I was looking at the statistics on China. We sell to China $130 billion worth of American products. They sell $506 billion Chinese products in the U.S. Hardly equal, hardly free and fair, and a source of the real problem. So when President Trump announced that he was imposing a tariff on foreign steel coming into America, what was your immediate reaction, Leo?
Well, let me just say that from the point of view of the United Steelworkers, we've been fighting for fair trade for more than 30 years. My predecessor, Lynn Williams, started at March for Jobs, and at that point in time, we were, and still up till today, we're not looking for special treatment. We're looking for a level playing field. And there isn't a level playing field, and China has been the worst violator, the worst culprit. If you take our accumulated trade deficit with China since they entered the WTO and have never played by the rules, it's almost $7 trillion. Wow. My view of that is that the deficits actually turn out to be wealth transfers, because you're buying more than you're sending, so therefore you owe them money, you owe them something. And so we've been fighting for this for, like I said, almost 30 years. We think that the president moved in the right direction, but maybe the most important thing is that Wilbur Ross, as the Secretary of Commerce, and the study they did, they basically came to the conclusion that if the next 20 years were like the last 20 years for steel and aluminum, it would affect national security, and so we have to do something now.
Right.
We've lost in the aluminum sector, we went from 15 smelters about 10 years ago to 4 that are running and 1 that's idle. In steel, we've been decimated. We used to produce 135 million tons of steel. Now we do about 85 million tons. China used to do 500 million tons. Now they do 1.25 billion with a B. And so their business is, they want to put us out of business. That's their role. That's what they're believing they can do. We can talk about that with aluminum. We can talk about that with steel. We can talk about it with tire. We can talk about it with cement. We can talk about paper. We talk about glass. In every one of those sectors, they produce more than they can consume, and they dump it mostly on us, but anywhere in the world.
But isn't it also true that China doesn't really export much steel to the U.S.?
Well, what China does, they export enough steel to determine what the price is. And they have the steel that they try to do circumvention. I'll give you one of the really nasty examples. and one I have to try to keep my temper about. U.S. Steel invested $100 million in modernizing their oil country tubular mill in Lorain, Ohio, where we had 1,000 members. South Korea built a brand new oil country tubular mill, and they don't drill 1 inch. They don't drill in their own country. But they build that mill, they get their steel dumped from China, and they don't care, the South Koreans don't care that it's dumped in at a lower price, because it goes into their tube mill, and their tube mill destroys our market here by circumvention. So when you see the number that says this is what China does, to quote Joe Biden, that's malarkey. They circumvent in every way possible. You know who the largest exporter?
So just to be clear, so what you're saying is that what China does with all this excess steel that they make,
600 million tons.
They make a ton of it that they can't use, and
right.
In order to dump it or get rid of it, they sell it to other countries who then export it to the U.S. under their name. Is that
That's right? That's right. And the largest percentage increase in exports from a country to the United States was, you know where? Costa Rica.
Costa Rica?
Costa Rica steel exports to the U.S. were up 7,000%. Does Costa Rica make any steel? That's Chinese steel trying to make its way through Costa Rica into our market. Right. So we have to fight on every front, and we've been doing it, and I think the president moved in the right direction, but more important is what Wilbur Ross did.
Okay. Leo, you were born in Ontario, you're a Canadian, you looked at this, I talked to you the day of this, and you were concerned about the role of Canada. Many of your members are in Canada. Yeah. What's your perspective now?
Look, at the day that it came out was one where there was a lot of concern, and so we'd started to do some additional research. And what we found is, well, lo and behold, we didn't realize it, America exports more steel to Canada than Canada exports to the U.S. So in effect, not only on steel, but on some other products, the U.S. has a trade surplus with Canada. And look at, regardless of what the president said about Canada, he can't do anything, because there's an agreement between NATO and NORAD in America that Canadian metals will be a integrated product with regards to the American Defense Alliance with Canada. But in addition to that, there's a trade surplus. And I think that, I want to be careful how I say this, but I think the president's being educated, and he's come to realize that it's just not accurate what he'd been saying. And the mistake he made out in the West Coast of saying that Canada had a deficit when he didn't know what he was talking about, that's been all over TV, right. That he now knows that he was wrong.
But the context here is NAFTA as well.
Yeah.
Talk about your views on NAFTA.
Well,
the North American Free Trade Agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada.
I can say this on behalf of the labor movement, not just the steelworkers. The 6 major industrial unions and the president of the AFL-CIO met privately with President Trump, along with the U.S. Trade Ambassador and the Secretary of Commerce, to have a discussion about NAFTA. And what we've told him is, if this is a real NAFTA improvement, one that actually protects and encourages workers to have a better standard of living in all 3 countries, we're going to support it. But if it's a NAFTA that is just like the last one, that has really made life difficult for workers in all 3 countries, we're going to oppose it. And it's up to them. So I know that Secretary Lighthizer, I know that he has an objective of trying to get a trade deal that can be bipartisan and accepted, and we're willing to work with him. We meet with him whenever he wants. We have discussions about what we think should be in it. And if it happens, we'll support it. If it doesn't, we'll oppose it.
Let me ask you about what this means for jobs. I want to sort of bring it back to folks in the Pittsburgh area, in this region. You know, I know that if I recollect correctly, U.S. Steel says that they're going to, is it reopen Granite City?
Yes.
Which is not in the immediate Pittsburgh area.
Right.
But Leo, as you look around, do you think this will have a direct impact, the president's actions, on jobs right here in Western Pennsylvania?
I think that we have to make sure that the administration has the tools it needs to enforce the actions the president wants to take. Right now, it's very difficult because the Commerce Department and the U.S. Trade Office, ITC, the International Trade Commission, they don't have enough staff.
Right.
And the Chinese in particular really figure this out. We'll file a very valid complaint on something at the International Trade Commission on some kind of product where China's cheating, they'll immediately file some frivolous project, and at the International Trade Commission, they have to decide how can they defend all two, to use an example. That might happen 50 times. So the president has to figure out how to, and the administration have to figure out how to put enough money in the pot so that we can enforce what he's agreed to. And if he does that, then it's going to turn into jobs. Just since the announcement, we've had about 3,000 jobs where people have gone back in aluminum and on steel. And if we can do something about this oil country tubular goods in the pipe business, that will be more jobs again.
Well, most of these enforcement actions, as you mentioned, take months.
18 months. 18 months is considered quick.
18 months. I mean, that's ridiculous. And this particular action by the president imposing a tariff, so-called Section 232, yeah. I presume that is pretty quick.
It's almost instantaneous. Because he has the unilateral right to take action in order to protect American international security. And so that was one of the things that I said about Wilbur Ross was very smart, figured out where the operation was, looked at the last 20 years to the next 20 years and said, yeah, this will affect our national security. I'll give you an example, if I can, about putting in a trade case in the International Trade Commission. It won't be steel or aluminum. We put in a very, very valid case on tires. Under Section 421, it's called. They were found guilty, the Chinese were. They had a 3-year penalty. In the first 6 months after the penalty expired, they put 50.1 million tires into the American market in 6 months. Destroyed our pricing business for our tire manufacturers in America. They couldn't earn the cost of capital for a long time. Yeah. And so those kind of things by China, I mean, I'm a bit out on the far end of this, because my view is you violate the rules 3 times, you don't get back in the market. Yeah. And I haven't been able to convince many of that, but 3 strikes and you're out.
Right. It makes perfect sense to some of us, I'll tell you. We're going to take a quick break, Leo. When we come back, I want to ask you, though, about those who say this is going to lead to a trade war. Get your view of that. And then let's talk a little politics, because you've been right in the middle of a lot of politics lately. We'll be right back. Stick with us.